Happy days are here again, the skies above are clear again. Let us sing a song of cheer again. Happy days are here again.
The idea of the Nebraska City Veterans Memorial Building was first conceived in 1927. Calvin Coolidge was President of the United States. In 1927, Charles Lindbergh flew the Spirit of St. Louis across the Atlantic nonstop, direct from New York City to Paris, as the first solo transatlantic flight. Work begins on Mount Rushmore and would not be completed until 1941. The new Nebraska State Capitol building, begun in 1922, was under construction and would not be completed for another 5 years. Downtown Nebraska City was the hub of business activity, not only for the town, but for all of Otoe County. Factories in the city were large employers, including the Morton Gregson Packing Company, as well as the cereal mills. Nebraska City was home to 3 brick manufacturing plants. The largest apple orchard in the state was located near the town. The Craigle Manufacturing Company was producing windmills that sold throughout Nebraska and the surrounding states. The Burlington Railroad provided passenger service for the community. St. Mary's Hospital had just been completed, and the first patients were admitted on February 13, 1927. The people of Nebraska City loved their parades and found some reason to have 2 or 3 every year. And in 1927, Nebraska City had a clean, well-lit, and prosperous downtown. It was at this time 12 individuals came together and discussed the need for a Veterans Memorial, as well as a city community building. All 12 were active with civic projects in the community. Most had helped with the recent St. Mary's Hospital project. Paul Jessen had been the judge for the 2nd Judicial District of Nebraska for 8 years. John Miller, clerk of the Otoe County District Court, as well as the vice president of the Nebraska State Historical Society. He was also editor of the Rotary Weekly Hub. He rode his bicycle to the courthouse throughout the year, in spite of having a wooden left leg. Early in his career, John Steinhardt worked at the Otoe County National Bank as a teller. He was also the former postmaster of Nebraska City. He later organized and was president of the Otoe Foods Product Company. He was also appointed by the governor as a trustee for the School for the Blind. He worked tirelessly to make Nebraska City a better place to live for all. John Hyde Sweet was the managing editor of the Nebraska Daily News Press. He also served as the president of the Nebraska City Chamber of Commerce, as well as the president of the Nebraska City Rotary. Each day for nearly 50 years, he sat in front of his typewriter and wrote a minimum of 2,000 words. He was a strong believer in community service and encouraged others to be involved. He once wrote in the newspaper about the lack of involvement by some city residents.
What must be the mental attitude of a man who continues to live in a community without contributing anything, not even a few minutes' time to that community? Is such a man so dense that he cannot see benefit to him of helping the town he lives or loafs in? Let him look at it entirely from the materialistic point of view, and surely he'll agree with others that when he helps his home, he helps himself. That is, he should agree, unless he's a latter-day old Scrooge.
This group of 12 decided to consider themselves a self-appointed committee. They all agreed that it was time the people of Nebraska City and Otoe County worked together and with the American Legion in planning and building a suitable memorial for our servicemen. The building would be a community's tribute to all those men and women who in wartime have borne the brunt of battle, in the Spanish-American War and World War I, as well as a continuing memorial who in the years to come shall render like service. Up to this time, the only structure in Nebraska commemorating World War I was the Memorial Stadium at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. It was completed in 1923 and was financed by the University of Nebraska Alumni Association. Nebraska City would have the first actual building commemorating World War I and the Spanish-American War veterans. On November 11, 1927, the first official meeting of the organization took place, At this time, the Committee of 100 was formed. It represented all phases of the business and social life of the community, including the Rotary Club, Lions Club, Campfire Girls, American Red Cross, Chamber of Commerce, Otoe County Medical Society, the Dental Society, Boy Scouts, Eagles, Elks, Board of Education, and Otoe Hook and Ladder Company, just to name a few. The American Legion donated to the committee 2 lots located at 8th Street and 1st Corso, where their memorial building would be constructed. The committee reviewed plans and designs. The total construction cost was estimated to be about $75,000. It was agreed that the committee would help raise $50,000 and the remainder would be secured by a mortgage on the property. Plans for the memorial building were printed so the community could see a likeness of the structure and the proposed floor layout. Canvassing committees were organized to help raise the money for the construction. Committees were organized by voting precinct, with each precinct having a chairman. There were 128 volunteers who went door to door throughout Nebraska City and the rural areas of the county. John Steinhardt and Ella Steinhardt both knocked on doors. Hyde Sweet, editor of the local newspaper, as well as George Heinke, who would later be elected to the United States Congress, also canvassed the neighborhoods. Downtown merchants and businesses were also canvassed. William Kropp was the chairman of the Wyoming Precinct Canvassing Committee. Other canvassers included Charles Moyer, chairman of the Belmont Precinct, John Worth, R.R. Ricketts, George Otkin, and Richard Kimmel. The canvassers raised a little over $50,000 in cash and pledges for the construction of the building. $50,000 in 1928 is the equivalent to about $691,000 in today's dollars. This was a major task, taking under consideration just the year before the community had donated nearly $76,000 for half the construction cost of St. Mary's Hospital. Construction began the early part of 1929, with the completion date set for November 11, 1929, just in time for Armistice Day. As November neared, last-minute work was being completed on the building. The Nebraska City Building and Loan Association placed this large ad in the Nebraska Daily News Press the day before Armistice Day. On November 11, 1929, Armistice Day, just 2 years from the day the Committee of 100 was formed, the memorial building was dedicated with a crowd of 3,000 attending the first day events. This was the beginning of a 4-day celebration. Governor Arthur Weaver attended the first day of the celebration and dedicated the building. The dedication was broadcast across the region by the Lincoln radio station KFAB. There was an overflowing crowd, and large speakers were set up outside the building so all could hear the governor's speech. The memorial building was open for tours, and over the next 3 days it hosted breakfasts, luncheons, dinners, banquets, and speeches by local dignitaries. November 13th was proclaimed American Legion Day with a parade down Nebraska City's business district. The memorial building dedication program covered the 4 days of events. The cover of the dedication program described in a few short words the purpose of the 4-day celebration: commemorating a nation's defenders, observing the state's anniversary, and demonstrating a community's coordination. Of major importance is the slogan placed at the bottom of the program: offering the world another great idea, work together. And that is what it took to accomplish the building of the memorial building. The community was able to work together and raise the funds with the help of nearly 2,000 individual donors, as well as a long list of businesses, societies, and groups of citizens to construct the building. It took the entire community working together to make the memorial building a reality. On November 11th, the first day of events, at 9 a.m., the Committee of 100 met. The crowd was so large the meeting was moved from the Veterans Room to the large auditorium. It was at this time the Committee of 100 turned over the Veterans Memorial Building to the newly formed Memorial Building Association. This organization would be the owners and have the responsibility of operating and maintaining the building, as well as making the payments on the $25,000 mortgage. The last day of events was the American Legion Day. War trophies were on display in the Legion Room. A luncheon took place served by the American Legion Ladies Auxiliary. The evening activities included an athletic carnival, which included the YMCA gymnastics team, as well as 3 boxing matches. Just a few weeks before the building dedication, an event took place that would have a major impact on the country for years to come: the stock market crash and the Great Depression of the 30s. It's unlikely the construction of the memorial building would have taken place if it had been considered just 2 years later. In spite of the national economic downturn, for the next 11 years, the memorial building served as a community center and a National Guard armory. The primary meeting space adjacent to the auditorium was reserved for the American Legion, veterans of foreign wars, and the United Spanish War veterans. The basement dining hall and kitchen was operated by the American Legion Women's Auxiliary. The building hosted organizations such as the Nebraska City Chamber of Commerce, Women's Club, Campfire Girls, Boy Scouts, as well as dances, graduations, concerts, and other large social gatherings. In 1938, the Nebraska City Alumni Association was established and met regularly in the building. Starting in 1935, the Nebraska City Junior-Senior Proms were held in the auditorium of the Memorial Building. The building was used as a National Guard armory for Company A of the 1st Battalion, the 134th Infantry. The National Guard paid a monthly rent for the use of the building. This rent paid over half the monthly expenses to operate the facility. In December of 1940, the Memorial Building Association received a letter from the Adjutant General informing them that the lease on the Memorial Building would be terminated as soon as the troops are withdrawn from the state. The last rental payment was received in 1941. The loss of the National Guard and the monthly rent was a major financial shock to the organization. Without the Guard payment, the association could not meet the financial obligations of operating the Memorial Building. As a result, the monthly mortgage on the building went unpaid. By 1943, the Memorial Building Association was in danger of being foreclosed on. Fletcher Neal, a businessman in the community who was the manager of the Western Division of the Ohio National Life Insurance Company, came to the building's rescue. Mr. Neal paid off the debt to the Nebraska City Savings and Loan. He worked closely with the Memorial Building Association and the city government to have the ownership of the building transferred to the city. In March of 1943, the city accepted ownership of the building. A plaque was placed on the building thanking Mr. Neal for his generosity. After the war ended, the National Guard returned to the Memorial Building and rent payments resumed. The building continued to serve as a community meeting place. The Otoe County Gun Club held monthly meetings in the Memorial Building. The Girl Scouts were granted a full-time office in the building, which they maintained until the mid-1990s. The American Legion Women's Auxiliary continued to be active and were responsible for the downstairs dining room and kitchen. Children's Christmas parties sponsored by the Women's Auxiliary were held each year in the building. The tradition of high school dances, as well as each year's annual junior-senior proms, continued. Hobby and antique shows, as well as coin shows, were regular events. Red Cross blood drives took place several times each year. Basketball games were a regular after-school activity in the auditorium. The city eventually moved the Parks Department offices to the Memorial Building. Each year, the Nebraska City Alumni Association held their annual banquets in the building, taking advantage of the fully equipped kitchen to prepare lunches and dinners. Starting in 1980, the Nebraska City Alumni Association took it upon themselves to make repairs, improvements, and upgrades to the Memorial Building. Just a few of the improvements included new air conditioning, drop ceilings in the auditorium and dining rooms, a trophy room for the Alumni Association, new paint, new curtains, stage lighting, an upgrade of the building's electrical system, a handicap ramp, restroom renovations, a Girl Scout office renovated, as well as many more improvements. Thousands of dollars were donated by hundreds of alumni. Groups such as the World of the Aging, Girl Scouts, women's clubs, JCs, various graduation classes all helped with the renovations. Carl Nelson was president and Fred Otkin vice president of the Alumni Association at the time the renovations were begun. Mr. Nelson passed away while the renovations were in progress. The Steinhardt Foundation made a $40,000 grant in memory of Carl Nelson to assist with the upgrades. Mr. Nelson had been a member of the Steinhardt Foundation and was a good friend of Mrs. Steinhardt. The memorial building continued to serve the community for the next 24 years. The Alumni Association had a permanent office in the building and each year held banquets and reunions. The City Parks Department also operated out of the building. The American Legion and other groups continued to meet in the Veterans Room. The Handy Bus also had an office in the building for a few years. Because of high maintenance costs and low revenues, as well as updated safety codes, as required by the State Fire Marshal, the decision was made to close the building to the public in 2007. The World of the Aging organization was the last group to vacate the building. After sitting empty for 8 years, efforts are currently underway by a group of citizens who believe the Veterans Memorial Building can once again be an important part of the community.
Happy days are here again, the skies above are clear again. Let us sing a song of cheer again. Happy days are here again. All together shout it now. There's no one who can doubt it now. So let's tell the world all about it now. Happy days are here again.